So, it turns out I was wrong about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, as were most people to be entirely honest. Most people saw the trailer for the show and immediately dismissed it, and so did I. The animation looked a bit off as it seemed Marvel was unsure if they wanted 2D or 3D and just settled on a weird amalgamation of the two. Honestly, I thought the show was going to get stuck in development hell and never be released considering this was supposed to originally be about Tom Holland's freshman year as Spider-Man. Needless to say, I am so happy that didn't end up being the case. This show became so much more and almost felt like it had the quintessential qualities of what a Spider-Man show should be, and I swear I'm going to get to that in a second. I know this is a bit different than what I'm usually talking about, but I enjoyed it so much I couldn't resist talking about it. I'll definitely be doing more content outside of my norm, so I hope you guys can enjoy the videos I have planned coming. Before I even get into the show itself, let me just say it has been a long fucking time since we got an actual good Spider-Man show. The Spider-Verse movies are awesome, and for all its faults, I enjoyed Tom Holland's home trilogy, but we have been starved for a good Spider-Man show, plain and simple. Ultimate Spider-Man was decent when I was a child, but man, looking back, and I watched maybe half of the show that came after before I stopped caring, and that was pretty much the sentiment among everybody. The last good show was, of course, Spectacular Spider-Man, and my god, have people been dying to get that show revived. In a perfect world, I would have loved another season, and so would everyone else considering Josh Keaton has not been able to stay away from all things surrounding the character, but I gotta say, this show feels like a genuine and true return to form. First thing I gotta bring up, and spoilers if you haven't watched, highly recommend, the show makes an interesting choice in choosing to have Peter become Spider-Man after Ben's death. I know it's as simple as wanting to mirror MCU Peter, but it was definitely an interesting decision to see play out, considering the MCU was deathly afraid of even saying the guy's name. Ben himself, as well as his death, is also such a vital part of Peter's journey as Spider-Man, and teaches him to truly take on that idea of great power coming with great responsibility. And don't worry, I promise I will get to that amazing reflection of the line, but you get my point. I'm assuming they're going to have that tragedy happen soon, and it's also probably why they chose not to have Norman say the famous line. Since every Spider-Man has to have a canon event, I'm definitely interested to see what they might do with this one. However, this show does a very good job at juggling multiple storylines and having multiple episode arcs, feeling more like an actual show than a 6-hour long movies like certain MCU shows. There's the arc of the entire internship Peter is given, secretly being a way for Norman to develop some insane new technology. There's Nico and Peter's relationship and Peter and Norman's relationship, and most importantly, there's Lonnie Lincoln's development. I don't think I've ever truly cared about Tombstone in any real way until this show. He was amazing and spectacular, a cool side mission in Spider-Man PS4, and was unfortunately a henchman for Kingpin in the Spider-Verse movie. He hasn't been around much, and I knew his origin and a few stories featuring him, but again, he never really interested me. But they are cooking maybe one of the greatest fall from graces in any cartoon with this character. I fully bought into Lonnie as a character before anything Tombstone related actually started happening, and once it did, I was legitimately heartbroken to see his destiny begin to unfold. Him helping Peter defeat Scorpion was definitely cool to see, but almost made me fearful they would make him a hero. I don't know why I had that fear, but we're dealing with an MCU adjacent project, so that's probably why. Otherwise, I think that scene just adds to the heartbreak. That paired with the fact that he's no longer tied to the 1/10th, he has no reason to stay in the gang, no one threatening him, nobody he truly owes, and it sucks to see, but they are cooking on a level most cartoons can't touch, so I'm excited to see where that story goes. He's just going to actively choose to be a villain, and I can't wait to see how they develop that even further. There's also the Peter and Norman dynamic we need to touch on. There's never been, at least to my knowledge, an exploration of this specific version of the relationship between Norman and Peter. We've had the obvious admiration and respect Norman has for Peter, as well as Peter looking to Norman as almost another father figure before it all goes wrong. We've also seen how that relationship can spiral into Harry having animosity towards both Peter and Norman because he feels as if he's being replaced. It's a very interesting scenario to see play out, and I love it every single time, but this specific iteration is something very unique. Norman recruits different teens for the purpose of finding Spider-Man, but also because of what he's building. That in itself is a layered story that eventually gets resolved by the end of the season. However, once he finally learns who Spider-Man is, we see a brand new version of the relationship as he and Peter actually begin to work together in an almost twisted version of the relationship Peter has with Tony in Homecoming. Seeing him rely on Norman in the field and also lean on him for advice was something genuinely different we never had really seen before. It's so important when a character like Norman, especially with who he becomes, influences Peter and his belief system in the way he does, particularly with the great respect line. I liked the way Norman seemed truly polite and almost made me think this version would be different, but that line truly solidified what he would become. He doesn't see power as something to be used on behalf of others in a manner of helping. He sees it as a stepping stone for more power, if anything. The reason I believe Norman's words hit hard is because for the most part they rang true. Even if he has his own twisted view on what he's saying, the world does need the best version of Spider-Man it can possibly get. Someone who's going to be able to dedicate themselves 100% of the time without any distraction should be the hero Spider-Man claims he is. We see the show take these words and twist them into something Peter almost uses to justify killing Scorpion. He's stopped, funny enough, by Lonnie of all characters. I was surprised to see it would be him to teach Peter what he should truly be doing, but it was a welcome one. It also just makes his eventual descent into Tombstone even sadder. He becomes a pivotal figure in Peter's life because of what he was able to stop, only to become the very thing he didn't want for Spider-Man. Not to mention, there was a beautiful parallel created with the Goblin scene at the end of No Way Home. You can tell the words ring true with Peter as well, even if they shouldn't serve as justification to stoop to the level of a supervillain. He understands he needs to be on top of his game as often as he possibly can, while also understanding his position as someone who's a symbol of hope, as someone who can serve as an inspiration, and as someone who's a true, genuine hero. The last thing I want to touch on regarding the first season itself is the paradox that occurs, as well as the setups for next season. I loved seeing Strange appear again and having him and Peter team up. The way his second appearance comes off in the show at first is that it's a different Strange from the one that showed up in episode 1, and it's easy to assume given that all the comic book media feels a need to reference the multiverse, but having the build up to the reveal that Peter created Spider-Man himself is such a sick closed loop. Some of you may not know what I'm talking about, but it reminded me immediately of how in the comics, Barry Allen eventually runs so fast he travels in time and turns into energy, becoming the very lightning strike that turned him into the Flash in the first place. It's a cool twist on the radioactive spider that would have otherwise just bitten Peter and given him his powers, and that would have been it for the lore. As for the setups, I cannot wait to see how they're paid off in the future. There's the appearance of the Watcher, which unfortunately does not bode well for Peter at all. We also have the obligatory symbiote arc. Given that Norman has his hands on it, I've seen people suggest he may become Venom for some reason. I think that's a completely pointless idea considering they're already setting him up to be another villain with the introduction of the prototype glider. There's the scientist stealing Peter's blood, so that could create a whole host of other issues and maybe even get a Ben Reilly arc, but wholly wishful fucking thinking. Then we have what could be, in my opinion, one of the best arcs in any Spider-Man show or movie. Peter's father is alive and in jail. And to make it even worse, May has known presumably since he got there. Not only do I think it has major implications for the symbiote arc, but it could also show us a unique relationship once more, but this time with Aunt May. If Peter finds out May knew his father was alive this whole time and didn't tell him, that's definitely going to strain their relationship. We've never really seen Peter and May at odds before, so to see Peter go through something as grave as something he'll see as betrayal from one of the only constants in his life, only to have the symbiote join the story and bond with him? I've always enjoyed when the symbiote is portrayed as an allegory for drugs. Peter is at such a low point in his life with what he sees as a betrayal, a father he might think never wanted him, the loss of a mentor being Norman, or even that mentor becoming his enemy, as well as the loss of a friend in Lonnie, only to have this miracle drug come into his life with the promise of making him stronger, faster, and what he believes to be a better Spider-Man. As for the story with his father, in most stories he's either a scientist or an undercover agent for S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever other government organization along with his mother. They end up dying when he's young in most iterations, but it's very interesting to see him not only alive but in jail. My assumption is he's either in jail for messing up as a scientist or being blamed for some international incident as an undercover agent. I don't think they'll make it too complicated considering this is just a show, but both seem unlikely considering May is still able to see him and he's not in some supermax. However, his desire to know about Peter in the way he asks makes it seem as if he and May hadn't spoken in a while. Another possible suggestion is as simple as Richard being a criminal. I would love it, and I can't imagine the implications of what Peter would think of his own father being the one thing he actively fights against, but the show has shown it's very capable of operating in the gray areas when it comes to why criminals do what they do, so I'm sure they can handle a little bit of complexity. I won't spend too much time on the other setups, but to name the rest, there's Nico's powers, Daredevil and Finesse, Harry's new company, Doc Ock creating his arms, and that's pretty much it. There's nothing else that could possibly be coming in the next season that would be important enough to even mention in this video. God, this might be horrible. Okay, so about a day or so after the finale aired, this image was released, and I was so goddamn happy. We might get another relationship with Gwen and maybe even another iteration of her death at the hands of Norman, and it made me think about everything that could stem from that. And then this second picture hit the fucking timeline. Frankly, I am not looking forward to this. I wanted a project that was fairly separate from the multiverse, or at least if we had to do it, there wouldn't be more Spider people to overshadow Peter. The Spider-Verse movies are different because they already set a multiversal precedent. Maybe she'll be a product of Norman having Peter's blood, and that definitely won't stop me from watching the next season by any means, but I'm definitely going in a lot more cautious than this first season. I don't have an issue with Spider people showing up necessarily, I just hope it isn't the multiverse slop we've been getting for the past umpteenth Marvel project. My expectations were definitely high-erd with this season, and I hope the animation does improve in the next season, but I'm 100% on board with this show, barring that one example. And while there are a few small changes I would prefer, this show has truly captured my attention, and I legitimately cannot wait for season 2. As for you guys, what'd you think about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? Are you looking forwards to seasons 2 and 3 since they were already renewed? I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, subscribe if you're new. I know this was a bit different for my normal subs who tune in, and if you're watching, I truly hope you enjoyed it, as I do want to make more diverse content, but still stick to the video essay style. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, peace.